Well, here we are. I'm Tom Osman, and this is Whatever Comes Next. It's the podcast where I explore the world of underground and independent music making. And on today's episode, I am talking with Ian Lanspeary of Phoenix, Arizona post-hardcore quartet Common Wounds, who almost exactly 2 months ago put out their debut full-length record, All Night Blood. And we are here to talk about that, to talk about the making of the album, to talk about the experience of playing in Phoenix, Arizona, talk about some of Ian's other experiences in 2+ decades of playing in the music world, and songwriting, the music business, touring, and all such things. And I guess I'm getting better at making these introductions shorter. So the album is out. As I say, it is on Protagonist Music. I will put all links into the description for where you can get the album and where you can follow the band. And I recommend that you go check it out. It's a very powerful and fiery record, as you might expect from a post-hardcore band, but also with all kinds of interesting melodies in there. And it's very emotive, kind of apocalyptic as well, I guess. Really standout drumming, too, from my perspective. And yeah, if you would like to follow me, you can at Tom Osman Sounds on various social media, and you can go to my website, tomosmansounds.com. If you would like to see what I'm doing musically, I've just recently put out an album with a Guria drama called Real Silence, and I've already started working on the follow-up. I'm going to play a track from the album. I'm going to play Lost Voices at the end of this interview with a little clip coming up in about 5 seconds. So there is nothing left to be said, but Ian Lanspeary of Common Wounds, take it away. So I see a beautiful wall of vinyl behind you. Where are you right now?
I'm in my living room in my house. Yeah.
And how much of this vinyl behind you is yours, and how much more do you have in other places?
That's actually just one row. It goes down like 2 more rows, and then I've got 7 inches, and then a lot of the stuff on the top row. My wife is a huge Goonies fan, so we have all sorts of Goonies like Funko Pop toys, and we have lots of nerdy stuff all around our house, mostly movie and music related. So yeah.
And I know that you got lots of records, did you say?
Yeah, lots of records.
I don't have a huge amount of records, but last year I was living in Berlin, and now I'm back in the UK. And even for what I think to myself as being a not very big vinyl collection, when you have to move and when you have to ship stuff, you realize, this is a bit of a nightmare. So have you had to relocate with all of your various goodies?
Not in many years, and we're pretty well settled into this house. I don't foresee us leaving anytime soon in the near future, or ever, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how things go. But yeah, actually the last couple moves, the first thing that I always move is the record collection, because it's just so tedious and so much. But I can't find it in my heart to part with any of it. So it just keeps growing, and hopefully I don't have to move it again, like I said, anytime soon. But we've been in this house since it's actually 10 years this year. We've been in this house. So yeah, no foreseeable plans to move yet. So
yeah, you've stuck your roots down.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And for the good of our ourselves and for my record collection, we're not moving. So
And that's in Phoenix, Arizona. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, we're in Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah.
Is that where you're originally from?
Yeah. My wife and I are both natives, actually. We were both born and raised here. We're actually zoned for we have chickens in our backyard. So we have a flock of chickens, and we've got some raised bed garden stuff. And we're kind of just trying to have a little homestead in the middle of a giant hot desert city. So we'll see how it goes.
On the topic of it being hot, I don't know if you know Justin Pearson from Def Club and various other projects.
The bass player from my last band is actually the bass player of Def Club. So
Ah, cool. Yeah, because I saw them just the other day. They were playing in Glasgow, literally at the bottom of my street. I also bought one of his books at the show, his first book that he did, and he's talking about growing up, and he's mentioning Phoenix, Arizona, and how brutally hot it is. So I'm wondering, from your experience, does that tie in very much with that? Like, how tough is the heat in Phoenix, Arizona?
it's pretty tough. So I'm a auto mechanic by trade. I've been doing that ever since I got out of high school. So I work in the elements, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's brutal. Yeah, it's hot. It's real hot. Especially lately, like the last 2 or 3 summers, we've had like the longest run of triple digit temperatures. And not even triple digits, but above 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know. I'm just used to it because I was born here, I think, and
Mm,
I've been acclimated to it. It gets rough because like right around September, you're over it, and you really just want it to be over, and it
mm.
doesn't really let up until like mid October, and then it's 4 to 5 months of triple digit temperatures in Fahrenheit. So it's pretty hot.
Yeah,
But
I've just looked it up and I've seen, okay, 90 degrees is 32 in Celsius. That for me is
okay,
pretty hot. 100 degrees is 38. Yeah, that's pretty brutal from my point of view.
yeah. So probably upwards of like 40 then in some instances, like
Yeah.
yeah. So it's pretty hot. It gets hot here. Like 112, 115. We the record temperature. We've only hit it a couple times, but it was 122 degrees Fahrenheit.
Jesus.
That's
Okay, that's
that's the
50, that's 50 degrees Celsius. That is
record.
officially like too hot.
Yeah, yeah,
So what about the rest of the band? So the band is Common Wounds. Are the rest of the guys also acclimatized to Phoenix?
yeah, yeah. Corey, our other guitar player, I believe he's a native, if I'm not mistaken. If not, he's lived here for a very long time. Matt Martinez, our bass player, he's a native. The only one who's not is our drummer Steve. He's actually a
Mm.
transplant from San Jose. He moved here. Uh, I want to say 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. But he's been in the band pretty much ever since we did the first EP
Mm.
under the Common Woods name, the cassette tape that came out a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's
Okay.
been with us for a couple years now. So
They can all take the heat, so to speak.
yeah, he's acclimated to it. Steve has. I'm sure it was a big culture shock coming from like the Bay Area of California, where it's pretty much nice all the time. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure it was pretty brutal, but he seems to enjoy it, I think. Um,
So you recently put out All Night Blood on Protagonist Music, and I think you also put your EP out on that label as well.
yeah,
So yeah, you've got this, I think as a band, you've got this really cool combination of the sort of abrasive rock aggression, I would say. Like I've seen noise rock and post hardcore used as terms. I'm always a little bit like resistant of using post terms to talk about music because it's just like,
sure,
if you
sure,
said post rock to someone, they're like, what does that actually mean? If you've never heard the
right,
bands that kind of like fit into that category. But I would say like it's abrasive rock music, but you've got these
yeah,
very melodic elements as well that I really appreciate. And sometimes they kind of like they jump out when you're not expecting it. Like a couple of tracks, particularly that I noted, Parochial and Lost Voices. You've got these really beautiful emotive parts in them that really kind of like stab me in the heart. And I'm like, oh, I wasn't like expecting to get like emotionally hit like that. But yeah, I really appreciate the that kind of like contrast that you've got going in the music. You got some beautiful melodies in there as well that,
no,
you
thank
wouldn't necessarily expect if you come across a band and go like, oh, it's noise rock. Sometimes noise rock is just sort of like anxiety inducing panic. But
you, sure.
in terms of the overall sound that you've got, how much has that sort of come from different influences between the different members of the band?
I think the whole idea of what we try to do and what we've set out to do from the beginning was just kind of play to our strengths, and like yeah, just like all the influences that we came up with. And like I'm all over the place. Like I was very much rooted in punk and hardcore through my adolescence all the way up to now, and that's a primary force. And along the way, it all started with grunge for me. Like I'm very much a
Mm,
product at that time. I right around the time I started middle school, actually like eighth grade or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but like, Nirvana, Nevermind, like that album
yeah.
is that's the whole reason I picked up a guitar in the first place. I wanted a drum set, but my parents said no, so I got a guitar instead. But yeah, so I started with that, and that was kind of my gateway into punk. And then from punk, I got into hardcore
Mm.
and got into all the politics and stuff. And then once I got into the politics side of it, I got way into a lot of like the abolition bands, Still Life, Yara, Downcast, like super, super like politically charged music, but also emotive music too. Also, one of our big local bands is Jimmy Eat World. They're from Arizona, and
Ah, okay. I didn't realize.
I watched those guys come up, and I was always a huge fan, even though they weren't really a hardcore band, but like Jim was always at shows, and he had side project bands that people probably don't know ever existed because they played like 3 shows and broke up or whatever. But I always admired his playing, and their melodic sensibilities always really like spoke to me musically. Like
Yeah.
there's a whole era of that band, pretty much even before they signed to Capitol. Even I think they put out a few 7 inches of just like some just really great like like emo songs. I mean, I hate to call it emo because I know that
Yeah.
term's kind of some things, but I mean, I think that's generally what they identify as is like an emo band. But so there was always like that melodic side, like, and Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream was a big record for me. And that's
Mm.
that was kind of where I got into, I started to notice like the melodies in that were just so massive. Listening to that record, I just remember like having like physical reactions to it where I was just like, whoa, like this is really cool. But even hearing that record, there's a lot of dream pop influence and stuff and shoegaze. And then
I was wondering if there was a shoegaze influence because on Lost Voices, you've got this kind of dreamy section. I was like, is this a shoegaze thing that's going on? That was a
kinda,
cool, unexpected twist.
yeah. Yeah, like so through that I found out about like My Bloody Valentine and bands like Swerve Driver. And then once I found out about Swerve Driver, I was like, oh, they're the name's escaping me right now, but like they were on this record label that did all this other Britpop stuff. It's the same one that put out like Oasis initially and
Creation.
Creation, thank you. Yeah. So through My Bloody Valentine and Swerve Driver and Oasis, and I got way into Britpop. I had a huge Smiths and Morrissey phase, but I can't deal with Morrissey.
Oh, I know, it's tricky, but I do find it fascinating when I talk to American musicians who are influenced by UK bands because it sort of feels like in the UK, it's quite small. It's easy for things to cross over, but it feels like, at least from when I was growing up and I saw British bands try and go over to America, it sort of feels like it's too big to make an
Yeah.
impact. So, like, how were you exposed to that kind of British shoegaze, Britpop stuff when you were growing up?
Well, two ways. Mostly through reading magazines and reading interviews with musicians that were in bigger American bands, and like hearing their influences. And that's where I heard like a lot of people talking about My Bloody Valentine. And then once I found out about that, and then I mean, Oasis was kind of just they were huge here. But I do remember finding out about them fairly early on. A girl I worked with, in high school, I worked at like this big box retailer store called Best Buy. They sell like, electronics and all kinds of stuff. But this, my manager in my department, she was like way into like Oasis and Pulp and Blur and like that kind of stuff, like
Mm.
real poppy British stuff, I guess. But that's how I kind of got into some of that stuff was through her, and that's how I heard about Oasis. But then the other thing was we used to have an AM radio station here in Arizona called KUKQ, and it was like you had to be in like the right part of town to even get a reception because it was AM. And like but they played that was the first time I heard My Bloody Valentine. That was the first time I heard Sunny Day Real Estate. They were playing on there back
Mm.
in the 90s. They played a very good mix of stuff because they weren't a big radio station. They were very independent, so they were playing a lot of really
Yeah.
cool stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that I liked from that. There's a lot of bad stuff too, but quite a bit that I liked. But that's kind of how I found out about a lot of the shoegaze and a lot of the Britpop stuff was through that station. Yeah.
And you've mentioned getting sort of drawn into the political side of various hardcore music. So is that something that's come through in your lyrics? Like I was sort of I think it was from an interview with you where you were talking about your lyrical concerns, and a lot of it sounds quite kind of introspective and and personal. Is there a political element to your lyrics as well?
Yeah, I've always felt that they kind of go hand in hand. Like the whole idea of like coming from the personal is also like a political action in a way, sort of,
Hmm.
I guess. But I think songs um, like parochial's kind of, uh, I mean, it's kind of a, it's more of a, critique about, you know, Abrahamic and Western religion, but that in and of itself, especially right now in our country and a lot of other countries as well, like I think speaking out against that stuff and the religious influence that it has on politics now, which
Mm.
we've always supposedly set up our democracy as a separation of church and state, and we're not seeing that at all. We're just seeing all these neoconservative Christian nationalist types get involved in politics, and they're pushing that agenda. And so I think even though it's coming from a personal place of me speaking out against these things that I see wrong with the world, that's still political action to me.
Yeah.
Some of it,
Maybe,
but
maybe
a
kind of
lot of
like
it,
maybe like social commentary as well. Maybe that would be a better
yeah,
way
yeah,
to represent it.
yeah, for sure. And then songs like the songs like "The Diplomat," which kind of addresses the kind of politicians that are in power right now or that are seeking a power grab right now in our country.
That was
You know,
another very interesting track musically, like quite a shift, I would
yeah.
say. Like that's one of the sort of slower tempo tracks. This might be like a little bit late of a reference in terms of the things that were influential in your style, but it reminded me a little bit of A Perfect Circle in the
Oh,
guitars in the beginning, that kind of like early 2000s alternative rock. Yeah, I
okay.
liked the change of pace in that. It was a
Okay.
cool way to close the album. Did you always kind of figure that that was going to be the last track?
We kind of thought about it. It was definitely the last one we wrote. I think we wrote that song pretty much like a week before we went into the recording studio. To be like, I had I always had that main riff, like like that spacey delayed guitar riff, and
Yeah.
we had been jamming on it, and we all liked it. And then we're like, well, where are we going to go with this song? And I was like, then eventually we just got to a point where we're like, why don't we just like drone out that note and then just get really heavy out of nowhere and kind of fuzz it out from there. And that was just kind of the idea, and we ran with it, and it turned out really cool. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Perfect Circle though, because I've never disliked that band, but I've never really listened to them that much, to be honest.
They're
uh,
probably not, it's probably not something that's like so specifically them. It's just, I remember when their first album came out, I was a big fan of it. So there's like a certain kind of guitar sound that I associate with them, but there's probably, a bunch of other bands that would be
yeah, yeah, yeah,
suitable comparisons too.
yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of Hum, and You'd Prefer an Astronaut is like one of my favorite records of all time. Like I love that record so much. Very much like a mix of like, heavy guitars, really solid drums, but also very kind of space like dream pop elements in there too. I don't know. It's just really cool. But yeah, they're one of my favorite bands. Failure is another one.
Okay, that makes sense. I can see that.
And I know the guitar player from Perfect Circle is like a huge Failure fan. I think actually the second guitarist I think was in Failure, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there you
Uh,
go. We found by like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, we found what the
you're
connection is.
right. Side note: I have 1 degree of Kevin Bacon separation because my old band toured with his son's band.
Hey, I like it.
Yeah, Travis Bacon was in a band called Sixes from Olympia, Washington, and my old band toured with them. So we actually stayed at his house in, or no, we didn't stay. We were gonna stay at his house in New York because we were playing in New York, and he was living back in New York at the time. And he was like, "You can crash at my house if you want." And we were like, "No, I think we're going to this other place." But that would have been interesting if it was like his parents' house. I don't know.
Yeah, you might have met Bacon
Might have been
Senior.
right. So
Um, there's yeah, there's a few things I wanted to ask you about the album. So you recorded it with Zachary Rippey, and
yeah,
he co-produced it, and that was a Sound Signal Audio. Is
yes.
that somewhere that you'd recorded before?
Yeah, we recorded our EP there as well.
So, in terms of the particularities of playing there and recording with Zachary, what did you get from that space in particular, and what did he bring? Because I'm always curious when like people listed as a co-producer.
Mhm.
I'm curious to know like what was he actually contributing to the record?
Like there were times where we would have like a section where he's like, he would just kind of be like, I think we should try doing this here. That like I think there's I can't remember specifically which song, but there was one where he wanted to he's like, dude, we need to add strings right here, like just some like in the background, put some string samples, and I was very against it because I just have this whole thing with like I feel like every '90s like alternative band had like the song with the cello in it, and I feel like it was like I thought it was a very like cliche thing, and I still think that to this day, even though I love some of those songs. But he's like, "Yeah, we're gonna put strings in here," and I was just like, "No way, no way, that's stupid. Like, what? No, it doesn't need it." And then we came back in like the next day, and he's like, "Hey, let's re-listen to that song again." And he had put those in there, and I didn't even notice it. He's like, "What'd you think?" I'm like, "Sounds fine." He's like, "You didn't notice anything?" I'm like, "No, it sounds fine." He's like, "Well, I put those strings in there." It's like, you son of a bitch.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I think I know which track you're talking about. I can't specifically remember it, but it is quite subtle. Like I think I was listening to it and I thought
Yeah,
like, oh, is that strings there? But it wasn't, in your
yeah,
face.
right. Yeah, no, it was very subtle, but and it did add. Like he was right, I was wrong, and uh, it makes the song better for sure.
And what about
Yeah,
that particular recording space? Because I am also curious to know or to get insight from musicians about how important and how significant the recording spaces are, versus if you chose to record in a home studio and do the parts separately. Like, what do you
right.
particularly get from this space that you sort of can identify?
Oh,
Like, this is the sound of the place.
I mean, his space is very much like he's built it himself. I believe he was a contractor before. He did a lot of like construction work before he got involved in music. So his space is actually like this old. I don't know what it was used for before, but it was like a commercial, like an office space kind of thing,
Mm,
almost like a dentist's office, maybe. Like
okay.
there's a very definitive like you walk in the door and there's like a lobby area, and you go down a hallway, and then there's just multiple doors throughout the place, but he also lives there too. So it's a residential space. And then in the back section, he's built this studio out of the building. But it's all like, it's all great gear. It's professional gear. He knows what he's doing. And, but it's still very much like it has the feeling of doing a home studio with the benefits of all the good gear and equipment, I guess. I don't know. Like I guess
Mm.
that's the best way I can describe it. So it's still very much like a DIY studio, but he has all the cool gear. And I don't know, he's just really good at capturing things. And our personalities just get along really well too. Like he's just one of us. Like it's just like another guy hanging out with the rest of the band while we're in there recording. And yeah, it just makes it really easy and simple, I guess.
Do you think that you'd kind of like, let's say, if you were say you were on a big record label. I mean, I know that the reality of this doesn't tend to exist anymore like it did in the 90s, that like an alternative band might end up on a big record label. Let's say you're on a big record label and they go, right, here's a studio you're going to go to, and it's like, very professional but maybe a bit kind of sterile. Do you think that you would notice the difference in terms of the performances?
Probably, maybe. I've never had the opportunity of really recording in like a big studio. They've always been kind of smaller DIY spots that people have kind of built up from the ground up themselves.
Yeah. Maybe there's like a parallel between the recording environment and live shows, because I've been to see bands stadium shows, and sometimes you're like, okay, I really want to tick off the list that I've seen the Rolling Stones, but if I
Right.
could choose between going to see a band at a stadium or going to a tiny venue like I did with Def Club the other day, I
Yeah.
would almost always go for the tiny venue. So maybe there's
Oh,
that kind of
100%.
parallel with recording as well.
Yeah. I would probably definitely be intimidated walking into like a big studio, especially one with like history and reputation of like, being this, massive studio that people have sought out to go to or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like it would probably be daunting at first initially. I had always dreamed of, recording at like Electric Audio or something like that.
Me
But
too.
yeah, that would I mean, I guess you still could, but it's just not the
Yep.
the dream of recording with Albini is unfortunately gone. But yeah, like I don't know. I've honestly I've never really been like a big. I've never followed a bunch of like studios really. Like I know the
Mm.
whole Sound City story because Dave Grohl did the documentary and stuff, and that was really cool. And then of course Electric Audio, but like I can't really think of like any like specific studios. Like I've never
Mm.
followed. I guess I've never really followed that side of the recording process a whole lot. Um,
So before you did the EP, you had a few years where you were Dead History.
yes.
Did you actually do any recordings as Dead History?
Oh yeah, we did. We did an EP with that band as well. So that was still Matt and I. Matt and I have been doing this project in one way or another since 2016.
Hmm.
That's when we first started writing together and stuff. And then we had Nick Quintana. He actually played guitar on the Common Winds EP. He also played on the Dead History stuff. And then we had a different drummer, and that was Adam Hunt, who he's originally from California. He lived out here, but he was in a bunch of bands like DIY punk and hardcore bands like Graf Orlock and Ghost Limb and things like that. So that was what Dead History was. And then we found out that there was another band in Minnesota called Dead History. And there was no like crossover or communication about it, but they seem to have sort of more of a internet and online presence than we did.
Yeah.
They were getting like some press and some media, and the name was a little more well known as that band.
Yep.
So by the time lockdowns were over from COVID, we had gained Steve as a drummer,
Hmm.
and then started writing for the Common Winds EP. And I'm trying to remember when we actually decided. I think we decided to change the name like as we were recording the EP, if I'm not mistaken. So like while we're recording it, we're like, why don't we just change the name? Because this other band has like if you Google their name, they kind of pop up first. If you go to Spotify,
Yeah.
they pop up first. So like we wanted something that was something that we could kind of be our own thing. So and not have to like worry about competition or whatever, I guess.
It's a cool
So
name. I like it's a distinctive name, Common Wounds. Like from my own experience, I've found that coming up with band names is a total nightmare. So how easy was it or difficult was it to come up with the name Common Wounds?
Matt is the one that came up with it. I'm not exactly sure how. I think he's really good at like getting the band out there, and like he's got, I don't know, he just has more of like a business mind out of than I do as far as the band goes, because he's been doing it for a long time. And I believe in his previous band he was kind of in charge of all that. So he just has a really good mindset for it.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, I think he just like was coming up like putting random words together, and those two lined up, and we were like, oh, that's a cool name. So I wish there was a cooler story behind it, but
It's all good.
but
It doesn't.
but it fits though. Like I think it really fits like how we sound, and like I think it's you know I think it ties in with the lyrics a lot too. So
Yep, for sure. Yeah. Well, I say for sure. I mean, from what I understand about the lyrics, I don't actually. Do you have them like listed online, like on Bandcamp? Do you have the lyrics? I didn't
I'm
actually
not sure
check
if
that
they're
out.
up on the Bandcamp or not. I'm pretty sure you have to submit them to Spotify to get on Spotify. I think,
Ah,
if I'm not
interesting.
mistaken. Um,
All right.
and they're printed with if you buy the physical copy or the vinyl, there's a lyric sheet printed in there.
Yeah.
So
On that
yeah,
on that topic of the physical release, so I saw that you've got a couple of really cool looking colored vinyl. I think you got like one colored vinyl, and there was one that was like black with a sort of streak going
yep,
through it. I think those are sold out on Bandcamp, but are they still available somewhere?
yeah. So the black vinyl with the color stripe, we still have some copies of that. I think Death Wish might still have some too, because Protagonist has a distribution deal through Death Wish.
Ah, okay.
They may have some copies of that as well. That also helps us with international distribution too, because Death Wish
Mm,
has their European distribution and the North America one. So it's kind of a win-win for Protagonist to use them, because then we don't have to,
Yeah, that's very
It,
helpful because the international shipping is just a nightmare these days.
oh, it's ridiculous. I mean, I remember when I was trading records, you know, even in like the mid to late aughts, and it wasn't nearly as bad as it is now. It's so
Yeah.
expensive to ship overseas right now. But yeah, yeah. So we still have some copies of that. The Wax Mage handmade ones are officially those are gone. We only did 25 copies of that.
So have you been playing many shows to support the release of the album?
We've done two so far. We did a local show here in Phoenix, and we did one last weekend in Tucson, which is it's about 2 hours south of Phoenix. And then we've talked about doing some regional stuff. We'll see what happens. We're all in our 40s. Well, I think Steve might still be in his late 30s. He's a little bit younger than us, but we're all older and married or have life partners, and
Yeah. Large record
Corey,
collections.
yeah, yeah, and Corey's got kids. My wife and I, we have a daughter as well, but she's 21. She doesn't live at home anymore, so we're fine with that. Um, but yeah, as far as we all work full time, so trying to tour now it's a little more involved than when we were younger, for sure.
Yeah. And I'm curious because this has popped up in a few interviews now. It seems to me like the merch table is of pretty key importance to
Mhm.
independent bands.
Yeah.
So when you're playing a show, like how significant is the merch?
Um, we haven't. I mean, we have the records, and then we have like two T-shirt designs. We actually just started making T-shirts. Beforehand, I think the only T-shirt that you could get was through the Death Wish store only, and it was like print to order. So if you
Mm,
ordered it, they would print one and just ship it to you.
yep.
So when we did the record release show in Phoenix, it was actually the first time that we ever actually printed T-shirts to sell on our own. So that's kind of
You've entered the t-shirt market.
we've entered the T-shirt realm of our merch sales now. So yeah, you know we were like, we're not as cool as Fugazi. We're not going to just rely solely on our record sales to move us along. We're not that cool, but
It is
we're
pretty
gonna.
cool. It's pretty difficult to be as cool as Fugazi, to be fair.
It is. I would say it's almost unattainable. I feel like that was a very time and place thing, and they just. I don't. They to me they're. I mean, that's the pinnacle of punk rock to me, is that band. Like
Yeah.
they did everything right. They were able to do it, and they were in a space where they could continually just do it the way that they wanted to. And I think we do that with our band as well, but like we don't care about whether or not we sell T-shirts.
Yeah. On the topic of doing shows and doing tours, like how involved have you been with the booking side of things?
Matt handles most of that stuff. Most of the show offers we usually get through either email or through like Instagram or things of that nature. And he usually filters it out, and he'll only come to us if it seems like it's going to be a worthwhile kind of thing. Because we get a lot of these. Like we even got asked to play. We got an email from like the Whiskey in LA, in
Hmm.
Hollywood, and they're like, "Hey, if you want to pay this much money, like a pay to play kind of thing," we're like, "No, sorry, not interested. Like
So
that's not our."
that's something that I'm not familiar with. How does the pay to play thing work?
Um, Essentially, you buy tickets from the venue, and then you sell the tickets to make your money back. So
Do you get a cut of the bar?
usually you don't get a cut of the bar. You usually get a cut of the ticket sales after you've resold the tickets, but you have to pay for them up front at whatever value they've established from the
Hmm.
venue.
So any ones
And
that you don't sell, you're covering the cost of.
yeah, pretty much.
What's the
It used
capacity for the whiskey?
Oh, I have no idea. Probably 500. I don't actually, I'm not sure. I
Hmm.
know I know it has history as like a big club because it's on the Sunset Strip, and like that's where Van Halen and all those like hair metal bands played back in the day. But that's just not our scene anyway, period. Like it,
Yeah.
I can't imagine a band like us playing at the Whiskey anyway, unless it was a completely random scenario that where certain things lined up in a ridiculous way to make that happen.
Yeah, I like it. You're not 100% closing the door, but you're like, I don't really think it's very likely.
No, it's not very likely, but I mean, well, like my old band, we were friends. There was a band called Let Live that was kind of popular for a while there. They were on Epitaph, I think. They put out
Hmm.
some records. But my old band came up with those guys. So when they got signed to Epitaph, they did a big record release at the Troubadour, and they invited us to play. So we got to play at the Troubadour, which was cool. And we didn't have to sell tickets, but they wanted a cut of our merch sales, which is another thing that we're running into at a lot of clubs. Well, not us specifically, but a lot of bands are running into is like
Yeah,
a lot of these bigger venues are starting to want to cut a merch sales just so you can set up your merch table and sell your own merch. And that I would not tolerate at all. Like that's just ridiculous. Like they didn't pay to get it printed. They look at it as we're renting you a retail space for the evening is the
yeah.
approach to it.
But it's like the last safe environment for bands to actually make money, right? Is the
Right.
merch table.
Yeah, now they're trying to get that too, and that doesn't jive with me. So, and I think a lot of venues are seeing some backlash from that.
Hmm.
So I think it's tapering off, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, so yeah, we haven't run into that specifically yet, but we haven't played any bigger venues like that yet either. So like the biggest venue we played was there's a place here in Tempe, Arizona, which is just like a suburb of Phoenix called the Marquee Theater, and I think that is like 1,200 capacity venue. And we
Hmm.
played we opened for Boris, and that was the biggest venue we played. But it was a well attended show, so it was really good for us, and people came early and saw us, and I think we gained some new fans from that. And yeah, they didn't. We actually didn't set up any merch at that show. We didn't have the record out yet, so we
Mm.
excuse me, we had a couple people come up and ask us if we had anything for sale, and we just kind of guided them to the Bandcamp thing because we didn't want to have to pay the venue any merch
Yeah, any kind of fee.
fees or anything. Yeah.
On the
So
topic of playing live, how kind of true to the record versus modifying tracks? What's kind of like your approach when it comes to playing this stuff live?
we mostly just play it pretty much as it is on the record.
You don't have too many overdubs that kind of make it complicated to play live.
No, we're kind of we've been thinking about this idea for a long time. We have yet to put it into play, but we kind of want to have like some interludes in between songs and stuff just to
Hmm.
kind of make it flow better, and kind of make the live show just more of like I don't know, just a little bit more of an experience than just a band up there playing our songs, I guess. We have yet to implement it though, so we have all the stuff for it. We just haven't done it yet. But yeah, aside from that, like I intentionally kind of write the songs it's a song that I've written. I try to keep it to where, because I do vocals and play guitar at the same time, so like I don't want to overcomplicate things.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, yeah, I kind of just I would much rather keep it simple for the rest of us and be able to play extremely well for what we do than have to work. Because I've been in bands where it was like very complicated music and it's fun for a minute, but then you're just constantly stressed out about like, oh, am I going to hit this part? Am I going to hit that part? And
Yeah. Do you use the same tuning for all of your songs? So I think I read that you're down tuned. I don't know what your tuning actually is.
yeah, we play in B standard, so pretty low.
That is pretty low. That's like Crowbar territory.
Yeah. I love Crowbar.
Me too.
Yeah, I saw them many years ago. I didn't know who they were, but when I was in high school, we went to a Pantera concert, and they were opening for Pantera. So
That's a cool.
Pantera
That's a cool
Pantera
one
has
too.
not aged well with me so much.
Entirely just because of the music, you don't enjoy it as much anymore.
No, just Phil Anselmo as a human, it makes it harder to enjoy.
Fair
But
enough.
I mean, I mean, Dimebag Darrell's he was one of my first like guitar heroes when I first started playing
Mm,
guitar. His riffs are just awesome, and
yeah.
I won't deny that of Pantera. But yeah, they just did like and the aggressive side of it didn't like when I was younger, I was full of a lot more
Yeah.
anger. I mean, well, I'm still full of anger, but like I had a lot more outward aggression as a young man than I do
And
now. I'm a
I
lot,
know what you mean. I remember like 20 years ago, I used to walk to work and I would listen to the Great Southern Trendkill before I went in there. And I'm just like,
yeah,
I'll still listen to it from time to time, but I don't quite need to pump myself up to that level of aggression before I go out.
yeah, totally, totally, yeah.
So if everything's tuned down to B, you don't have to worry about retuning between songs.
I mean, we do, like we have specific breaks just to make sure that like everything's staying in tune.
Oh, but
We're
you don't have to actually change to different tunings.
no, not changing to different no. And I think between all of us, we're old enough and we're enough of gear nerds where we could, if we were going to do like alternative tunings and stuff like that, we would probably have a separate guitar for that off to the side and swap out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like messing around with alternate tunings, but then you run up against the practicality where you go, great, now I have to completely retune everything or have another
Yeah.
guitar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we always have a backup guitar off to the side anyway. It's just ready to go in case one of us breaks a string or something weird. But
Yeah.
yeah, we haven't messed around with that too much. I've considered it, but yeah, like you said, the practicality of it for a live setting usually kind of deters me from actually trying to use it. But yeah, I mess around with them at home from time to time though, because you can get some really cool tones doing some of that stuff. Like
Yeah.
Soundgarden did some really cool stuff. Sonic Youth, all their crazy tuning. Like
Yeah, for
I love
sure.
all that.
And from
But
time to time, I was a huge Sonic Youth fan growing up, and from time to time, I'd like go, oh, let's have a look at some of these tunings. It's like everything's in E and a little bit of B. What the hell is this?
yeah, yeah, it's pretty wild. Like I remember reading something about how one of their guitars got stolen
Mm.
years back, and there's just because I mean I don't know how much of this is true and how much of this is like rock and roll myth or whatever, but they would actually write the tunings on the guitar so that they would know that that's the guitar for that song.
Oh shit!
So I guess since that guitar was stolen and they didn't memorize what tuning it was, there's like certain songs that they can just like never play. I mean, well, they're not playing any songs anymore, but at
Yeah,
the time they're just like, yeah, we can't play that song anymore because that guitar got stolen. We have no idea what it was tuned to. So
that is pretty DIY. I mean, I respect that.
yeah, but yeah, no, yeah, they did a lot of really, really cool stuff. Like, yeah, I was a big Sonic Youth fan. Like seeing them live back in the day was an experience for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I got to see them, and it was still cool, but it was like 2000s, maybe like 2010, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, it would have been cool to see them in like I don't know, like mid 90s.
Yeah, I saw them in 90. The first time I ever saw them, they headlined Lollapalooza in 1995, and that was the first time I saw them. And Hole was the co-headliner,
Hmm.
Courtney Love and Hole, and that was like right after Kurt Cobain had committed suicide. And watching Hole on that show was a shit show.
Oh,
They played great, but it was crazy. But so many people were there for Hole. So by the time Sonic Youth went on, like a lot of people had just left. And so my friends and I just literally walked up to the front of the stage to watch Sonic Youth. And then they played for like 2 hours or some ungodly length. And it was amazing. That was like one of those like transcendent shows for me as a young kid. That was
yeah.
a big one.
I think as soon as I said that I saw them in 2010, I thought that sounds like rubbish, and it's just an indication of me not recognizing how quickly time has passed. I think I saw them in 2004,
Okay. Yeah.
but in any case, it was still a little bit later.
Yeah. But I mean, they still play great. I saw them I saw them around that same time saw them a couple times in the, earlier 2000s and mid 2000s, and they're still great. I always enjoyed watching them. So,
Yeah, for sure. Um, so basically, when I started this podcast, I kind of started accidentally, and I didn't really have a theme for it. And it was only after doing a few episodes that I went, "Oh, I think I actually know what this podcast is about." So there are certain topics that I'm trying to investigate in terms of like the practicalities of, people being in independent DIY bands.
mhm.
So I've been more recently trying to sort of fix for myself what the key topics are. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about, which seem to me to be kind of major considerations for underground DIY bands these days. And one of them is the topic of streaming services. So
Mm.
we talked about the fact that you've got the album out on vinyl. Do you have it on CD as well?
No, we did not print CDs. We didn't really see a viable demand for CDs, and usually you have to make a significant number of them to get
Like a decent price
just to
per.
place an order, yeah, or a
Yeah.
decent price point. And it wasn't feasible for us. So
So with the album being out on vinyl, um, obviously, like we said, you're on Bandcamp as well, and you're on Spotify too.
yeah,
I get the feeling with Bandcamp that it's there's more going to the artists than Spotify.
yes.
What do you think of the whole streaming industry? Is it like a necessary evil? Do you see positives with it?
Yeah, a necessary evil is probably the best way to put it. I think it's great that music is so accessible. It's far more accessible for the generations that grew up with streaming than it was for me growing up. Like I had to, but I was doing it differently as a kid. I always had a set of blank tapes in my backpack as a kid, and I would go to my friends' houses, and if there was a good record I heard, or a CD or whatever, I would instantly record. I'd be like, "Hey, can I dub this to cassette tape?" So that way, I just had tons of cassettes that I had just
Yeah.
dubbed. So, but I couldn't afford to buy music on the regular back then. CDs were 15 or $20, and vinyl was kind of dying out when I was in high school. There was still
Mm,
some of it, but it was tapering off big time. So it was mostly cassettes and CDs. But I think streaming, the benefit definitely is that anyone can access your music at any time for a relatively affordable fee. Um, Obviously, the downside is artists aren't getting paid for it.
yeah.
Um, and I guess, and I'm just finding out about this recently. I guess if you reach a certain tier of streams, you can start generating better revenues from streaming services. But that's how many people are going to hit those kind of numbers, especially an independent band. You're not going to hit these big numbers where you're going to get big payouts. I think it sucks that the guys like the CEO of Spotify or whatever, he's a terrible human being from what I know of him, from what I've read about him. So I think it sucks that he's, making billions of dollars off of other people's art.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I like the fact that people can seek out pretty much anything that they want musically now, which is really cool. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a catch-22 for sure.
One thing that I wonder about, because we talked about radio stations before, and you were talking about finding out about music from hearing it on the radio. I feel like with radio shows, there's an element that it's kind of like a cool record store where you go in and they've curated what they've got. And if you
Yeah.
find a place that you like, you can kind of go like, oh, I'm gonna like I'll take a recommendation because I know they have even like with an independent record label, you might go, I like stuff that they do, so I can take a chance on something. I don't know if like obviously Spotify has its algorithms which can introduce you to interesting stuff, but I don't know if it really has quite the same. I don't know if it's quite the same. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that it's really the same. Yeah, for me, it was, reading thank you lists and liner notes
Mm,
of old bands. So I'd get a CD from a band or a tape from a band, and I'd look through the thank you list, and any bands that they thanked, those were the bands that I would seek out. So yeah, I didn't have an algorithm really, feeding me anything. And then going to shows was the other way that I would find out about new bands. Sometimes there would just be a cheap show. It's like, oh, I have $5 to go to this punk show, and hopefully
mm,
there are two good bands. $5 for a punk show is cheaper than a $20 CD. So
yep.
that's how I found out about other stuff too. But I think I can really only speak to like because my daughter's grown up with pretty much all of this stuff her whole life. She's born in 2003, so
Does she like Taylor Swift?
Not so much, no. She likes some of it, but no, she's a punk rocker, man. She's very much a product of her mother and I. She's
Nice.
yeah, like she just went to the Drug Church show last week and was having a blast. Man, like she goes to shows all the time. She definitely took after her mom and I in that regard because, that's all I did as a kid was, I mean, that's all I've done most of my life was just music related. So going to shows, playing in bands, and then working a job to make sure I could keep playing in bands and go to shows. So that's kind of been the life for me. But yeah, she's just, I don't know if you're familiar with the band AJJ. They're from Phoenix as well. Yeah, they're more of like a kind of folk punk kind of band, very satirical lyrics. Their original name was Andrew Jackson Jihad, so they've abbreviated it to AJJ. So the satire of the name originally did not age well, so they abbreviated it. But so they're a band like they're friends. They're friends of mine and friends of other friends that I've known through music and stuff. And my daughter just one day comes and she's like, "Have you heard this band AJJ?" I'm like, "Oh yeah. There's friends of mine." And like, she was just completely dumbfounded that I knew of this band that she had found on her own without any influence. So like
Yeah, that's very cool.
in that regard, she was listening to something else on streaming and it recommended her this other band and she found out about them and now it's like one of her favorite bands. So
Do you
yeah, so
think that this, sorry, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, so I think in that way, like there can be some pros to algorithms
Mm,
maybe, but I can see where the initial idea of like this, I don't know, algorithm or AI or whatever it is telling you what to listen to sucks. Like that doesn't feel good.
yeah.
But I don't know, like, but if the end result is you're finding out about new music, I don't know. That's a tough one.
Do you like when did you first start playing in bands? How long ago?
Oh man. So I got my first guitar in 1991 and pretty much started jamming with friends right away. I wasn't in my first, like, pretty much every high school band I was in didn't really do anything. Like,
Mm,
didn't really play shows. Like, we would play like parties, but um, a lot of the time we would just do cover songs and things of that nature. But we had some original songs and it was fun. But I didn't really start actually playing original music in bands until probably around the time I was in college. And then I was in some really bad pop punk bands. Uh,
and when did you first make a recording?
oh man, first record I ever made was actually with my one of my early pop punk bands in like this would have been like '98 probably. There's actually it was when like the group of friends that I had in high school. One of them passed away, and it was like a big shock to us because it was like the first time a lot of us were like, "Holy shit!" Like this is what it's like to lose a friend or to have someone die. Like we had never
Mm,
experienced that. So we started a band around that to do like a benefit show, and then that band actually ended up becoming a band outside of that. So we literally made this band and wrote like a group of songs to raise money for funeral costs. And then we decided to keep going. And so we started playing shows and we recorded a demo with that band. So that was the first time I ever recorded. It was all live. The only thing we tracked separate was vocals. So it's a pretty rough rough recording. I mean, I still look back on it fondly because it was a fun experience, but
yeah.
probably not going to be releasing that to the greater public anytime soon. But uh,
So when was like the first time you did a recording that you actually sold?
that would have been 2004.
Okay, so
Uh,
that was already kind of like getting into the age of streaming services. I mean, I'm not entirely sure when Spotify actually started, but
yeah, no, this would have been like I remember CDs were still pretty prominent then. But like MySpace was kind of a thing. So you had like the MySpace player,
Yep.
So you could like have the songs on, you could have like a band page and have your songs up there for people to listen to.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't think it was being monetized yet, though. I don't think MySpace was taking a cut of that or anything.
It was
Um,
before all the record labels panicked and went, right, we have to make sure that we extract maximum money that we can.
yes, yeah, yeah. Because that's when you were still. I mean, we were still selling CDs. Like that was still the SoundScan era where they were tracking CD sales with barcodes and all that
Mm,
stuff. Because I remember that CD we had to. They asked us like, "Do you guys want barcodes on it? Do you want to be involved with SoundScan and all that stuff?" And I was like, "I guess I don't know." So yeah, probably right around 2004 when we actually officially released a record on a label that had, that was for sale, I guess.
yeah. Now
So
there are obviously like countless stories over the years of record labels ripping off artists. Like I remember when I was a kid, you'd see I grew up in I mean, I was born in the early 80s, but sort of like 90s was when I started paying attention to music. Those bands that we mentioned, like Blur and Oasis and all that kind of like Britpop era stuff. I would see that. I'd see it was in the charts. I'd be like, oh, they're rock stars.
yeah,
Now, some of those people, I'm sure, made a decent amount of money, but I know that there are tons of bands that like seemed to be doing really well and they actually end up getting completely screwed.
right,
So we seem to be in this age now where like the opportunity to get on, a major label or a larger record label has sort of diminished. But I wonder for bands like on that kind of like grassroots punk rock, hardcore level and mentality, do you feel like it makes a significant difference? Like, is it better or worse, or is it just different in terms of being a band and trying to actually, get a little bit of return? It's not like you're necessarily expecting to get rich, but you want to
right.
like kind of get paid for the work that you're doing. Is it easier or more difficult, or is it just different? Yeah, is it just different now, do you think?
Um, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I'm not really sure. I think different would probably be the best way to describe it because, like, even for us, for Common Moons, for this album, we paid out of our own pocket for a publicist because we wanted people to know that the record exists. We put a lot of time and money into it, but being that we're not on a label, we're paying out of pocket for all of this stuff, for publicity and all that other stuff. But at the same time, we're getting those returns back if we start selling records.
Yep.
And that's so far it's been working for us pretty well. But I don't know that a lot of bands really go that far with it or that they have the means to do that.
So like if you look back to say 2004, do you think it would have the the structure wouldn't have been in place so much to be able to kind of finance a record yourself and promote it yourself? Like that kind of wouldn't
um,
really be the thing to do.
I think it was there because I was doing that with bands at the time. Well, I guess bands after that, because that band in particular that put out that record, that was through a label. It was an independent label, though. It wasn't like a big label.
Mm,
Uh, and then, same with other bands I've been on. Like we have a friend, and very much like how with Common Wounds and with Protagonist too. Like it's a friend of ours that has a record label, and they like our music and they want to put out our music. So initially, I guess the way it's always been for me is we come up with the money to record and produce the record, and then the label comes up and pays for the pressing.
mm,
And then from there, if either the label's going to promote it on their end with ads or advertising, whichever way they want to do that. And then as the band, we go on tour to promote the record. So being that Common Moons isn't touring, that's why we decided to hire a publicist to help with promotion that way.
yeah.
So touring, but yeah, all the other bands I've been in, we would just tour to promote our records, and that was kind of how we marketed ourselves. So I don't know, like I've never signed like a big contract or anything like that where it's like where and I've never really felt like I was getting screwed out of anything other than Spotify getting billions of dollars and paying us fractions of a cent for streams. But
Yeah. In terms of the records that you've got, so
Mhm.
how does that relationship work with you and the label? Like you have an agreement that there's a split with all of the sales?
Um, we get 10% of the pressing offhand to sell for ourselves and our own, and
Okay.
then typically anytime after that, you just if we sell all of our own copies, then we can either purchase more or work out. I don't. It's all very. I don't know. It's all very just conversation based and
Mm,
on good faith, pretty much
yeah.
when you work with friends. So yeah, we can either. Yeah, I'm not even really sure. I mean, Brendan was just kind of like, Brendan from Protagonist. He was just like, let's put this record out, and I'm gonna pay to have it pressed. So so typically what happens though is if you get like a certain percentage from the label to sell as your own with no you know like that's just yours to have, and
Yep.
then the label, and then if you need more stock, then you just either buy them at cost from the label and then resell them at whatever price you deem them for your own merch sales and stuff. So
That's an interesting insight, yeah. And but then what about if they then sell the records that they've got? You have an agreement that they're going to give you some percentage of what they sold?
I think once pressing costs are recouped, then
Ah,
there's
okay.
because
Yeah,
they still
that
have to
makes
make their
sense.
money back for what they've put into it. So
Yeah.
typically, what happens is once pressing cost, but a lot of the time too, it's like it's on such a small level. Like you know, I'm not going to be chasing my friends down for royalties or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it makes sense. I'm just, I'm curious about a lot of the kind of mechanics of these things. Um,
okay, yeah, that's typically, to my understanding, that's typically how it works with a independent label. Like I said, I've never been on a big label or anything, so I don't really know how it works in the big world. But
yeah, a lot of lawyers, I guess.
yeah, lots of boilerplate contracts that are a novel thick and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, One of my old bands was offered a contract from a somewhat notable label at the time. They're not even a label anymore now, I don't think. But I remember reading through it with everyone, and I'm like this sucks. This is like a this is a he makes all the money and we don't make shit kind of contract. And we thankfully we didn't sign with it, and we found out that was a good choice. But yeah, I've just always kind of done it that way, and that's kind of always been the norm. Just kind
Yeah.
of with friends and networking with the people that and a lot of some people say it's not good to do business with your friends, but I don't know. I've had a pretty good run with it so far as music's concerned. So
Mm. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, as long as the friends that you have are people with integrity, then
yeah,
you should
yeah,
be all right,
exactly.
hopefully. As long
Yeah,
as
I mean,
people don't get too corrupted by money. But, if no one's
sure,
getting rich, then
sure,
hopefully it's all right.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I have heard horror stories from other friends and bands who have like, you know, oh, this guy put out our record, and then sometimes the records just don't even show up, or
Mm.
you know, or they say they're going to pay for this and pay for that, and then things don't happen. So like, I have heard of it going sideways from other people, but I've been pretty lucky, and um, you know, the bands that I've been a part of, we've done business with some pretty stand up people, so it's never really been an issue of nobody's fighting over money or
Yeah.
anything like that. So
Drawing things towards the end and thinking about the record and also what the band's got coming up.
mhm.
Um, as I am now in my mid 40s, I hate asking people like, what social media platforms are you on? But I suppose in this day and age, a lot of the time that's how bands are promoting themselves. So this
Yeah.
might be something that is more Matt doing rather than you. But where is the band in terms of your online presence, so to speak, and like where's the best place for people to go to if they want to, buy the album or see what's coming up with shows and future releases?
Most of our, I'd say most of our content and most of the stuff that we push is going to be on Instagram. That seems to be the best platform for it right now. I think I'm pretty sure we have a band Facebook page as well. We don't really utilize that a whole lot. I mean, Facebook and Instagram they're all one and the same now anyway, but for the most part, but, that's primarily where that's where we update the most often, and that's where we post most of our content is through Instagram. And then as far as buying the record, we do have allnightblood.com is the domain name, and that is basically, there's not a lot of content on the actual website itself, but it has links for the North American Death Wish store, the European one if you're overseas to buy the record. And then just links to like different interviews and videos, things of that nature. So allnightblood.com is another good one. And then that's pretty much it. And then Bandcamp as well. If you want to, we have a merch store on there where you can buy vinyl. I think that's about it. We haven't really ventured into like TikTok or anything. I know TikTok's pretty popular, but
that's where I've drawn the line.
Yeah, I have one, but I admittedly do not know how to use it. So it's a bit too much for me. I think it's, Instagram was a decent amount of content, I think. And then once I saw how TikTok operated, I'm like, I think that's too much content for the human brain to handle sometimes. So yeah, it's a little overstimulating for me. So yeah. I have one, and like my daughter sends me stuff on there. Like she'll send me funny videos or whatever every once in a while. And same with my wife, but like really outside of that, I have no idea what to do with it. So
yeah, I try and be responsible about using social media stuff and go like, I'm using this for a purpose rather than just mindlessly sitting there and scrolling.
Yeah, I try. There are times where I just doom scroll because I'm just allowing myself to retreat inward and just not be a part of the world, I guess. But I'm guilty of that from time to time. But typically I try to, have a purpose for it as well. Like, I'm actually going to post something or share something or whatever. So
yeah, but it's easy to fall into. I find myself that where I'm like, I'm going to go on to Instagram to do something, and then the next minute I'm scrolling. I'm like, stop this, and I put it down. And I go, hang on a minute, I picked this up for a reason, and I never did that.
Yeah, I do that all the time. Thankfully, my wife's usually good about like, giving me the, put your phone down. Oh, okay, sorry. Or, what are you doing over there? Nothing. Like, and I put my phone down.
It's good to have a support network in that sense. Keep you on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Ian, it was great to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
Yeah.
And
appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for all your insights, and thank you for the music.
Yeah, thanks for liking it. I appreciate the feedback and stuff.
My pleasure. Yeah, all the best. And I don't know if you have any plans to come and play in Europe, but should you at some point in the future?
Yeah. My old band went to Europe a couple times, and we had a great time. We went to the UK once, and we did a few shows there. And it was like, I think two shows in Wales, Newport, and Cardiff.
Yep, that would make sense.
And then we played in London, and then that was the extent of our UK visit. And then we immediately turned back and went to Western Europe. But
the advantage in Europe is that things are closer together. It's easier to get from one show to another than North America.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it got a little tricky because that tour was like 35 days. It was a long one. We went all the way into Eastern Europe too. We went into Bulgaria and came through all the Balkan countries, and it was intense, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, well, the precedent has been set, so maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I would love to come back to Europe. I love it there. I always have a great time. So,
well, I will pay attention to your Instagram feed.
Sounds great.
All right, thanks, Ian.
Yep, thank you.
Let me hear the fire and scream. What